He stood there, calm but bruised by the weight of the moment. A black man dressed in a plain suit, surrounded by whispers and judgmental eyes. The courtroom was filled with murmurs, some out of curiosity, others out of quiet prejudice. The officer across the room smirked, confident that his lies would hold. He had done this before, bending the truth, twisting reports, hiding behind the badge. He didn't know that this time his arrogance was about to destroy him. The prosecutor began, "Your Honor, the defendant is a threat to public safety." But as the words echoed through the courtroom, the man remained silent, his eyes fixed not on the lawyer, not on the judge, but on the officer who thought he was untouchable. This wasn't just another trial, it was a setup, and before it was over, everyone in that room would know who this man truly was. If you believe truth always finds a way to shine, hit like, subscribe, and stay until the end, because this story will flip everything you thought you knew about justice. He had no one sitting behind him, no family, no friends, no one willing to stand beside a man the police had painted as dangerous. The officer's testimony had already poisoned the air, false accusations, twisted details, all carefully designed to break him down. But the man didn't flinch. Inside, he carried something stronger than fear. Years of discipline had taught him to stay silent, to observe, to let others underestimate him. The judge studied him curiously. There was something about the way he sat, calm, controlled, yet commanding. It didn't fit the image of a criminal. Still, the whispers grew. "He's guilty," someone said. "They always are." And through all of it, he simply bowed his head, not in defeat, but in quiet patience. Because he knew what no one else did. He wasn't just a defendant. He was the investigation itself. Officer Daniels sat in the witness chair like a man who owned the truth. His posture screamed confidence, his tone rehearsed. He looked at the jury as if he were educating them, not testifying. "I arrested him personally," he said with pride. "He resisted, he threatened me, and I did what I had to do." The crowd nodded, conditioned to believe the badge before the man. The defense attorney didn't even interrupt. She simply let him speak, let him dig the hole deeper. Daniels leaned back, smiling faintly. To him, this wasn't just a case, it was validation. Another black man put in his place, another victory for his record. He didn't notice the quiet tap of a pen on the defense table, or the subtle glance between the accused and his attorney, because the one thing Officer Daniels didn't know was that this time, he wasn't the hunter, he was the target. When Officer Daniels was asked to recount the moment of arrest, his story flowed too smoothly, like a script written by someone who'd rehearsed every word. He reached for his waistband, he claimed confidently. "That's when I had to act." The courtroom murmured. It sounded believable enough. But one juror tilted her head. Something about his phrasing didn't sit right. Then came the evidence. Body cam footage, mysteriously malfunctioning at the time of the arrest. Daniels shrugged, pretending disappointment. "Technical issues, Your Honor." But the man sitting at the defense table raised an eyebrow. Technical issues? He knew the department's system inside out. There were no accidents like that. Still, he stayed silent. He wanted the officer to build the tower of lies high enough so when it fell, it would crush him completely. Every lie spoken that day echoed against the walls of justice. And one truth was waiting to strike back. As the officer continued his testimony, his words grew bolder, each sentence crafted to destroy the man's reputation. But then, for a brief moment, their eyes met. The officer froze. Something in that stare, calm, sharp, unshaken, pierced through his arrogance like a blade. It wasn't fear in those eyes, it was authority, quiet, controlled, and dangerous. The courtroom seemed to shift. The man's expression never changed, yet his presence spoke volumes. Even the judge looked uneasy, sensing an unspoken power dynamic that didn't match the narrative being told. The prosecutor cleared her throat, trying to regain control. "Officer Daniels, please continue." But Daniels hesitated. His confidence wavered. For the first time, he felt exposed, as if the man before him could see straight through him, down to every false word. That single look planted a seed of doubt, not in the defendant's guilt, but in the officer's story. And from that moment on, nothing in that courtroom would ever feel the same. One by one, the witnesses stepped forward, each telling a version of the story that sounded rehearsed. A store clerk who saw everything, a neighbor who heard threats, a woman who feared for her life. Different faces, same lies. They all pointed to the same man, quiet, composed, sitting still as if watching a movie he had already seen before. The defense didn't object. The lawyer took notes, letting the lies pile higher. She knew her client's plan. Let them hang themselves with their own words. But under the surface, the man's mind was calculating. Each false witness was a familiar name. Each testimony a breadcrumb leading back to the same officer, the one orchestrating it all. He wasn't angry. He was patient. Because patience was the first rule of his real job. He had seen corruption like this before, but never from this close. By the time the last false witness sat down, the courtroom felt polluted. A temple of justice turned into a theater of deception. And yet, deep inside, the real operation was just getting started. The courtroom buzzed with whispers after the sixth witness. Everyone expected the defense to explode, to object, to shout, to fight back. But instead, the lawyer stood still, quietly closing her notebook. "No questions, Your Honor." The room gasped. Even the judge frowned. "Counselor, are you certain?" "Yes, Your Honor," she said calmly. "For now." The officer grinned, thinking victory was his. The jury looked puzzled. How could anyone stay silent after such heavy accusations? But the defendant didn't move. His stillness wasn't surrender. It was control. The kind of control that comes from knowing you hold the truth in your pocket, waiting for the right time to use it. He leaned slightly toward his lawyer and whispered something no one else could hear. She nodded once, as if receiving a classified order. The silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Because sometimes the loudest message in a courtroom is the one you don't speak at all. Judge Hamilton had presided over hundreds of cases, but this one felt different. The defendant's composure wasn't normal. Not for an accused man, not under pressure like this. While most defendants fidgeted, cried, or broke down, this man sat with his hands folded neatly, his gaze firm, unshaken. Every word, every accusation bounced off him like rain on glass. The judge leaned back, observing the details others missed, the posture, the precision, the discipline in every move. This wasn't an ordinary man caught in the system. "Counsel," the judge said softly, "your client seems remarkably calm. Is he aware of the seriousness of these charges?" "Yes, Your Honor," the lawyer replied. "He's fully aware." The courtroom quieted. Something about that answer lingered, not just confidence, but certainty. Judge Hamilton glanced again at the officer, then at the accused, and for the first time, the balance of power in that room began to shift. By the third day of the trial, Officer Daniels was visibly restless. He'd been so sure of his dominance, but the defendant's silence, that unnerving, calculating silence, was breaking him. During a recess, Daniels approached as the man stood by the hallway water fountain. "You think you're smart, huh?" the officer hissed under his breath. "When I'm done, you'll never walk free again." The man didn't even look up. He simply replied, calm and cold, "Careful, officer. Some prisons don't have bars, only guilt." Daniels froze. That tone, the authority in it, didn't match a regular citizen. It sounded trained, professional. Back inside, Daniels' confidence began to crack. His testimony grew erratic. His voice trembled under pressure. The judge noticed. So did the jury. The man simply watched, unshaken, as if every moment was going exactly as planned. Because in truth, it was. It happened during cross-examination. The defense lawyer stood, holding a simple document. One Officer Daniels had signed months ago. "Officer," she began smoothly, "in this report you stated the suspect was uncooperative during questioning. But could you clarify the time of that interview?" Daniels hesitated. "It was, late evening." The lawyer's eyebrow rose. "Interesting, because at that exact hour, my client was in federal custody." A silence dropped heavy over the courtroom. Daniels blinked, caught off guard. "That can't be right." "It is," she interrupted. "You were interrogating someone who was already under federal protection." The jurors leaned forward. Even the judge looked confused. The defendant, still calm, folded his hands. For the first time, a faint smile appeared. Not arrogance, but inevitability. The wall of lies had cracked and light was pouring through. The courtroom didn't know it yet, but they were no longer judging a victim. They were about to meet the man who'd been watching them all along. The lawyer turned toward her client. "Would you like to speak now?" He rose slowly. The room went silent. Every movement was deliberate. The calm of someone who had nothing left to hide. "Your Honor," he began, his voice deep, controlled and precise. "My name is not Marcus Lee, as stated in this report." The officer's face drained of color. The man continued, pulling a small leather wallet from his inner pocket. "I am Special Agent Nathaniel Cross, Federal Bureau of Investigation." Gasps rippled across the room. The seal of the FBI gleamed under the courtroom lights. He turned to the officer, eyes steady. "You've been under observation for 9 months, Officer Daniels. Every falsified arrest, every fabricated report, all documented." The silence was deafening. The courtroom, once filled with doubt, was now flooded with realization. The defendant wasn't the hunted. He was the trap. The air turned electric. Every eye locked on the man now standing in the center of the courtroom. No longer a suspect, but a federal agent. Judge Hamilton leaned forward, stunned. "Agent Cross, are you telling this court that this case was a federal operation, Your Honor?" he replied. "Authorized and monitored for months." 2 men in dark suits stood quietly at the back of the room. No one had noticed them before. Now, badges flashed. FBI. The officer's mouth hung open. His lawyer whispered frantically, "Daniels, don't say another word." But it was too late. Every lie, every act of arrogance had already been recorded. Agent Cross turned toward him, calm as ever. "You thought you were silencing another black man, officer, but you were silencing yourself." The crowd was speechless. The entire courtroom could feel it, the weight of truth collapsing on the guilty. Justice hadn't just arrived, it had been sitting quietly in the defendant's chair the whole time. Officer Daniels's hands began to shake. The color drained from his face as reality set in. Every lie, every report, every false arrest, all of it was part of an FBI sting. He looked around the room, searching for sympathy, but found none. The jurors he once manipulated now stared at him with disgust. The same silence he had used to intimidate others now wrapped around him like chains. His voice cracked. You set me up?" Agent Cross replied evenly. "No, officer. You set yourself up the day you chose corruption over duty." Tears welled in the officer's eyes as 2 agents stepped forward, reading him his rights. "For obstruction of justice, falsifying evidence, and perjury under oath," one of them said. As the cuffs clicked shut, the courtroom erupted, not in chaos, but in a stunned, righteous silence. For the first time in his career, Officer Daniels wasn't in control, and the man he tried to destroy had just saved justice itself. The next morning, the courtroom was overflowing. Reporters filled every seat, cameras flashing, the story already spreading across the nation. Corrupt officer exposed by undercover FBI agent. Officer Daniels sat in chains, his head low. The arrogance, the smirk, the power, all gone. Judge Hamilton's voice echoed through the room. After reviewing the evidence and the federal testimony, this court finds Officer Daniels guilty on all counts: obstruction of justice, falsification of reports, and perjury. The gavel struck once, sharp, final. Daniels flinched as if struck by the sound itself. Agent Cross didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He simply stood with quiet dignity as the fallen officer was escorted out. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about truth being seen. For every man falsely accused, for every voice silenced by corruption, this verdict was a message. Justice can be delayed, but it will never be denied. As the courtroom emptied, Agent Nathaniel Cross gathered his files and quietly walked toward the door. No applause, no spotlight, just the quiet sound of footsteps echoing in the hall of justice. Outside, the air felt lighter. The storm had passed. He paused for a moment, looking up at the courthouse flag swaying in the wind. He had seen too many faces like Officer Daniels, men who wore badges but lost their honor, and too many innocent lives crushed under the weight of lies. But today was different. Today, truth had spoken louder than power. A reporter rushed forward. "Agent Cross, what do you say to those who don't believe justice exists anymore?" He looked straight into the camera and answered, "Justice isn't lost. It's just waiting for people brave enough to stand for it." Then he walked away, calm, resolved, disappearing into the crowd. Another case closed, another battle for truth won. If this story moved you, make sure you've liked, shared, and subscribed, because stories like this remind the world that even in darkness, truth always fights its way to the light.